Jade Dernbach changed my career. Before him, I was a feature writer mostly, looking for purely narrative arcs, using stats almost as punctuation. But there was something about Dernbach as a bowler that really annoyed me, and it had nothing to do with him. It was the commentators. Dernbach would come on, and straight away someone would say he was the most expensive bowler in ODI history. And he was. 408 bowlers had delivered 1,000 one-day international balls, but no one had ever gone for more than his 6.35 runs. That is not a record that anyone has ever wanted. Dernbach certainly doesn't want this on his tombstone. But it also doesn't tell us the full story of him as a bowler. Firstly, any modern bowler was likely to be the most expensive ever because ODIs were faster scoring by then. We can also say that Dernbach was not as good as Bob Willis, but no person with a functioning brain believes that Willis was genuinely 3 runs and over better than Jade. Then there was when Dernbach bowled. Not the era, but the time in the game. There had never been a guy chosen almost entirely as a late over specialist. It was a new position. So you had an era when people hit more and a new kind of bowler who was picked for the toughest part of the innings. It makes sense that he had a high economy. But there was no context to his runs per over. No nuance. It was just a number spat out because since the birth of ODIs, we had used it. It was listening to a Big Bash broadcast bring this up that led me to invent something for Dernbach and for all bowlers to get a better idea of their numbers. True economy. I took the idea from basketball, so I kept the same name. In that sport, you score from free throws, 1-pointer, inside the arc, 2-pointers, outside the arc, 3-pointers. But these were never all factored in together. So the players with the best field goal percentage, just shots made, would usually be 7-foot giants who only made 2-pointers from near the rim. Yet the most efficient scorers are usually ones who draw fouls or shoot a high percentage of 3-pointers. So a new metric was brought in, true shooting percentage. For cricket, I adapted this and brought in true economy and then true strike rate. It works like this. We know the expected runs for each ball in T20 cricket. The first ball of a match usually goes for 0.78 runs. So if you allow a single, you are minus 0.22 behind on true strike rate. And if it's a dot, you are 0.78 ahead. We can work this out for every single ball of one-day and T20 cricket. Why would we use an old-fashioned metric that only flattered spinners bowling in the soft middle overs? And once true economy was used, we added true strike rate as well, which is the exact same thing for batters. So instead of having a strike rate of 138, you might have a true strike rate of -3. The first number is handy. The second gives so much more. But why stop there? Cricket has a lot of information. We and others decided that it was finally time to use that. Welcome to the new world of cricket statistics that help explain the modern game. My latest book is The Art of Batting. It delves deep into how the best players ever made their runs. Get your copy today. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now. We really wanted to illustrate what all these new measures were. We think that they're important when discussing sport, but we also know that stopping to explain every metric in every piece is essentially impossible. So consider this the one-stop shop of all the different metrics and the new versions of analysis we now use. True economy and strike rate led us to look at true wickets. Again, using the same idea of knowing what happens on certain balls, we can tell how many wickets are due for when people bowl, because obviously in the middle overs, there are a lot fewer wickets than at the death. A bowler with 30 wickets in a tournament is great, but if 20 of them come at the death and someone else takes 20 at the top, they are much more important. And generally, wicket tallies are dominated by death bowlers, whereas true wickets helps power play quicks and spinners in the middle, giving us a better idea who is the best wicket taker. And similar to that with true runs, we're considering the position they came in and how many wickets, runs, and overs had already been used, and then looking at what the expected runs would be from that position. Because if a number 4 comes in at 4 for 2 in the second over, the expected runs are very different than if you come in at 80 for 2 after 9 overs. Anchors look good in this metric, but remember, we can also see what they do with their true strike rate. But can also help players like Andre Russell, who simply make so many runs from limited balls. And once we know the value of every ball, there are many things that we can do. One we like to work out is what kind of batter someone is. Traditional metrics of boundary or 6 percentage and docked ball percentage are limited. For instance, opening batters don't hit many 6s, they hit 4s because of the fielding restrictions. Most players strike big late in the game, but in the middle overs, their main job is to keep the dots away. So if you just look at dot ball percentage and boundary percentage, it tells you more about what number and the order the batter comes in than anything else. Whereas true dots to sixes adds context. So instead of openers looking like they all chew up dot balls, we can tell which one of them is actually great at manipulating the field. And those who do hit sixes suddenly have similar numbers to guys slapping at the death. Rohit pops on this metric, as he should. This is a new stat that we think we invented, but dot ball percentage is older. John Wright used to use it back in the 90s, for instance. Back when I came up with true economy, there was something else I was really interested in: how fast batters started. It was really obvious to me that there were guys who knocked it around and others who went bang. But again, the first 5-ball strike rate, while handy, was still stuck with the fact that middle over players started slow and everyone else was quick. Now we can work out which players start fast or slow, and this is really handy for teams. You don't want to decide where too many players begin sluggish. And shout out to the king of this, Luke Ronke, whose nervous energy meant he started every knock as if his ass was on fire. Himanesh Ganju has an impact metric we use. Essentially, we take the par score for a T20 match and then look at what the expected total is after a batter has done their thing. And you can do the same thing for bowling. So if the par was 170 when the batter entered the crease, and when the batter is out, it's 175, they are +5. The same thing works for bowling, just the opposite way. All of these stats work well for ODIs and T20s, but they also work great for the 20 over game when looking at players from different eras. That isn't the case for ODIs, as most ball-by-ball data starts around 1999. So how do you compare players across eras for the 50 over game? For that, Varun Elvakonda came up with a method that normalizes your average and strike rate for the modern era. It's not as good a system as true economy and true wickets because it lacks the granular detail. But it points out that Joel Garner wouldn't have gone at 3.1 and over in modern cricket, though he still would have been great. And they are called bird numbers because that was his nickname. By giving every player modern numbers, it's far easier to compare everyone. Big Bird is still great. Zulu numbers covers the batters, and that was Lance Klusener's nickname. Again, we wanted to show a strike rate of 90 in 2004 is worth a whole lot more now. These are more useful when looking at the best players ever. But they are almost entirely for fan use, but they still help us understand players more. There are some numbers that can work in all three formats, like match factor, but we use it the most in tests. It allows us to check a batter against the top order in the same matches. It can be warped if you happen to be in a team with great bowling or great batting. However, it still tells you the kind of pitches most players have been on. Some great players really get hosed because of their wickets. And we look at this for bowlers too, comparing spin to spin and pace to pace. Era factor is similar, but it has some differences. One thing we do with it is check players at the same position, in the same era that player was in. Using both match and era together is the best option. Era factor is really useful, but right now, Sri Lankan wickets are easy to bat on, and almost nowhere else is. So again, this gives you some info, more than before, but it's not a single number that you should believe in. Another thing that we worked on for the book, The Art of Batting, is to look at openers in tests by their records in England, New Zealand, and South Africa. It gives you an idea of their play against the moving ball. It's no different to what old fans did when looking at records in Asia to understand how good someone was against spin. Neither of these are foolproof, but they give you more of an idea. Strike factor in tests is something we use because you can't really compare Kagisa Rabada's strike rate in this constant wicket period to Trevor Goddard's dead ball era. I mean, there is no stat that is going to get them together, but at least adjusts for era. All the ones we mentioned so far we use, and there are plenty more that analysts have created that we aren't even aware of publicly. People come up with others but don't have the voices to share them. CricViz have more data than anyone else, and they have expected average. Essentially, when a ball is delivered, they go through the Hawkeye system to see how many other times a ball like that has been delivered, and then calculate what the combined average is. So an outswinger pitching on middle stump and hitting off at 143 kilometers an hour might average 5, while a 78 clicks long hop might be 87. They then calculated the expected average of balls from that, and also what the batters should have made. When I had access to CricViz, I loved trying to find a ball with an expected average of less than 2. But my favorite was when Tim Southee was dismissed from a low full toss down the leg side that he could barely reach. And I think the expected average was well over 200. There are also other things like runs above average, which I think Jonas was one of the first people to come up with. And there are plenty of different names for the same metrics or a similar idea with slightly different execution. Without a website like Baseball Reference to collate all of this, too many people will end up coming up with the same metric, not knowing it already exists. Others will be superseded by new metrics. In 2018, I came up with a few options for a new T20 vocabulary. True econ and strike rate obviously still here, while activity rate doesn't matter as much in a world of true dots to sixes. Balls per boundary is handy, but again can be picked up in another metric. But other things are still used occasionally in cricket. Since our book, median is something we've used more. It was in cricket from time to time, but should be talked about more. Usage is a stat for all-rounders because anyone who can bowl or bat a little bit gets that title, but a real all-rounder actually faces and bowls a high percentage of balls. Fielding metrics now exist, but they are done off the TV, so are really more like reporting on errors, but at least a step in the right direction. Never make the mistake of looking at one metric in isolation. Even average in tests doesn't always tell us the full story. Henry Nicholls averages 39 overall, but 48 at home and 29 away. There is no magic number. Every now and again, someone will come up with a new version of this, but in truth, cricket is way too complicated for a single number. We could call these all Jade numbers instead of true because of the impact he had on me creating them. And because we started the piece there, Dernbach's true economy in ODIs was minus 0.78. Bad, but not the worst ever. In all T20s, he was actually 0.15. So he was a plus bowler even as commentators were telling us how expensive he was. Dernbach is not a numbers person in real life, but he knew he was bowling the tricky overs and actually doing pretty well in them. And these numbers let us know more about the actual game than we ever have before.